and welcome to Threads Facebook page this afternoon, where I'm welcomed by the lovely, joined even, not welcomed, by the lovely Joanna Fortune, whose
And welcomed.
publication day it is today. Happy
Thank you
publication.
so much.
Oh, it's so lovely to see you and to celebrate your publication day with you. We thought today that we would do a bit of a Q&A with you. Obviously, I have lots of
Yeah.
questions as the a very soon to be teenager, because your latest book
Yeah, amazing.
out today is the 15-minute parenting book, and it's the teenage years, which is phenomenal. So, for those of you who don't know Joanna, Joanna is an amazing parenting expert, a psychotherapist is the word, isn't it? I always get that word muddled up.
That's the word. Yeah. I know. Yeah, there's so much that you could say instead of psychotherapist, but yes, psychotherapist.
And author of 3 books now. So your third one is out today, third one in the series.
Yeah.
And the first question I was going to ask you, Joanna, is why did you choose to write your books as a 15-minute? What is that whole 15 minutes, and why did you decide to go for the series?
Yeah, and I think, initially, Kim, I had thought, I wanted a parenting book that would really highlight that there are stages to childhood. And because there are stages to childhood, there are stages to parenting. Because as our children grow up, actually, it's incumbent on us to grow our parenting up with them. But often we spotlight the child and their behavior and their struggle. And we think, listen, I'm nailing this parenting stuff. It's this kid who's not taking what I'm giving, but actually, maybe the strategies that we use when they're really little were super effective then, but they're not effective as they grow. And that's nothing to do with anything other than your child has grown up, so your parenting must grow too. And initially, I had this kind of plan in my head that it would be this like one-stop shop of a book. It would take you from the cradle right up to the rave, and all of that. And really, it being pointed out to me quite early on that was, what I was describing was like the war and peace of parenting, and that would be overwhelming, and nobody wants a book this thick. And actually, it worked so much better to break it down, because it allowed me to give each stage of parenting and each stage of child development its due focus, to give it really, look, let's really break this down and drill into it. And for me, it's about understanding what's going on. That's part of it. And it's certainly, people have said to me, oh, the theory, that's so interesting. And I love that. And I do want that to be experienced as interesting. But more than that, I wanted this series of books to be experienced as useful, something that you could read and go, I can now do something different that's going to elicit a change. And so there tends to be so much mystery around, what does the therapist do, with the child or young person in therapy, and what kind of techniques are they using? And I have often felt, really strongly, that there are so many therapeutic techniques that could cross over and have a real impact in parenting by injecting a little bit of therapeutic parenting in. So delighted to be able to share some of those practical techniques. And it's probably no surprise that, the teenage book is the thickest book of the series. You think, actually, would you not have loads to say about the early years? And there are. But what was amazing to me was I probably could have kept writing and writing with this one. It just felt like, we had to be really selective with what we were putting in there, because there's endless things to talk about with teenage years. So I just wanted to keep play alive. I really just wanted people to be able to see ways to playfully connect and stay playfully connected with the teenagers, because often it's seen as a battleground. And I wanted it to be seen as an opportunity for shared joy and connection instead.
Fantastic. Well, I've picked out a few things that you talk about in the book, and I thought we could just talk through those. And then I've also got some lovely teenage parenting problems to throw at you as well.
Oh,
Um,
yay.
I really love them so much. You talk a lot in the book about doing parental self audits, and I just
Yeah.
wondered if you could talk us through that process.
Yeah, and that's something that I flag in the blue cover book, 0 to 7 years. But actually, it's something, you're dead right, I repeat in the green one, and I re-repeat in this book here with the red cover, because actually the parental self-audit is not supposed to be a one-off exercise. It's actually what helps us to see, am I growing my parenting up, and what is coming up for me at each stage of my child's development. So the parenting self-audit really asks us to go inwards and really reflect and explore our own experience of being parented at that stage of development, and what of that are we carrying forward with us. You know, I've said it to you before when we've had these chats that there is no better way to discover your own unresolved issues than to become a parent, because our kids are of us. You know, they are going to bring our stuff screaming to the surface, and sometimes I mean that literally, it'll come screaming out of us. But by the time we snap and lose it with our kids, it's rarely because of what they've done or said, but moreover what got activated in us when they did and said it. So I think it's really important that we reflect inwards on our own experience of being parented. What was great, what wasn't great, what do we wish had been differently, and then looking at what of that is shaping and informing. Because we can read books, we can listen to podcasts, we can do all of these things, and at this level of our reflection in terms of our cognitive brains, we can go, oh, I love that, I'm going to do that, I love this idea, I'm totally going to adopt that parenting style. But that's not what we default to when we're in a heightened emotional interaction. And teenage years, early years and teenage years are going to bring that really prominent front and center. But when you're in that emotional interfacing with your young person, what's actually happening, if you think of this as your brain, this is now your brain, my hand. What's happening is there's this exchange, it's very personal, it's very heated, everybody's getting heightened and heightened and heightened. Your teenager might say something very particular that just causes you to flip your lid. Now, when you flip your lid like that, the part of the brain that you've lost access to is precisely the part of the brain that remembers that podcast and remembers that book you read, because it's that neocortex thinking, reasoning, rational part of the brain. But what is now calling the shots when that's flipped? Oh, it's your emotional center. It's all of that parental self-audit stuff. That's now deciding what you do and say. So what we're trying to do is, by shining a spotlight on this and developing insight and awareness, it enables us to bring those lids back on, so that now they're not going to stay completely secure, because we're not robots, we're people. And when our teenagers push our buttons, and we all have buttons to be pushed, our lids will get loose and wobbly. What we're trying to do is that we don't flip them. And that's really where I'm coming from with the parental self-audit. And in this book, I'm also inviting you to go back and do a risk self-audit, because adolescence is such a rich time of risk-taking behaviors. So in order for us to parent through that stage for our children, we have to be really honest and go, what kind of a teenager was I? And what was my relationship to risk? And as a result of that, what is my relationship to risk now? And if we have a bit of a glossy version of, you know, I was an absolute joy to behold in my teenage years. My parents don't know how lucky they were. If you still have access to your parents, if you're privileged enough to have that, it might be a humbling experience to ask them or an older sibling what their recollection of your teenage self might be, and see, oh, okay, maybe not quite how I'm recalling it alone. Yeah. But I think it's just something. And again, it's not that you do it once when they're little, once in the middle childhood, and once now. When you feel that, oh my God, nothing is working, I'm actually feeling like I'm going to lose my mind with what's going on here at the moment. Pause, go back to your parental self-audit. It's going to help you to bring to conscious awareness that piece that's driving you crazy, and it will enable you to move forward in a connected way.
You also talk a lot about a problem-solving mind map. And I know one of the things that you've taught me a lot since we've been talking is to let my son sort his own problems out.
Yeah.
And sort of listen. I think you talked about the A&E before.
That's right. Rupture repair, A&E. Yeah. Oh, that's so. I'm just going to nod, Kim, and you could tell everybody. Yes.
Yeah, so A&E is acceptance and empathy. See, I do listen.
This is it. Because I think it's time to. Oh, A&E. She sees this as an emergency.
But yeah, I mean, can you talk a little bit about your problem-solving mind map?
Yeah, one of the underpinning piece for this, in the book, I'm going to talk, there's, 6 stages to the problem solving mind map, but really what's behind all of that is that I'm trying to emphasize, and really clearly in these years, I mean, I think it's true of all parenting stages, but in a particular way with adolescence, is to avoid a fix or change agenda. Because if our teenager, or when our teenagers are having a problem, okay, and sometimes they'll come to us and they'll say, oh, I'm really stressed out, or this is what's happened, and I had a row with my friend and I'm really upset, and wait till I tell you the story about that. If in listening to them, we are immediately joining dots as quick as they're speaking, and we go, oh, I know what you mean. Here's what you're going to do. You're going to take A, B, C. We're absolutely missing the whole opportunity to connect with them in how they're feeling in this moment now about what's going on. And we're missing an opportunity to support them in finding their way out of that, because we're not with our kids 24/7. So we can't be this little thing on their shoulder saying, oh, you're having a problem? Here's your answer. Here's your answer. We need them, particularly in teenage years, to be able to bring that out. But where this fix and change agenda piece comes up again is not all teenagers and not all the time are going to come and say to you, come here, I want to tell you what's going on with me. Sometimes they're telling us without words. They're telling us when they slouch around the kitchen with their comfort hoodie on and the hood up, and they're opening the presses and shutting them without taking anything on because they're trying to evoke something from us. Are you looking for something? What are you saying? But what they're doing is they're playing out this emotional distress, this irritation, this frustration in everything, that if we come in and go, what's wrong with you? Straighten up. Take your hood down. You shouldn't have your hood in that. If we go in and respond only to those overt pieces, we again miss the story. This is where the problem solving map comes in, is that you're naming first, I hear your struggle. I'm wondering if something's going on. You seem out of sorts. I notice you're really snuggled into that comfort hoodie and buried into the corner of the sofa. And this is just letting me know that you've had a hard day. And is there anything I can do to help? Is it, what's happening for you? I'm letting you know that I see the struggle, but I'm not demanding that you tell me what's going on or that you change your behavior. Is there anything I can do to help? I mightn't even have to ask that because I know my teenager, and I might let them know that I see that by just sliding a hot cup of tea or hot chocolate in front of them, or a nice little treat, and just walking away, just giving it to them and walking away. In that nonverbal exchange, I'm saying, I get you. I get that you're having a struggle. Because if even with the problem solving roadmap, if we jump too quickly to problem solving stage, we miss the opportunity to connect in that moment of meeting where my teenager feels felt by me. They're like, okay, you get it. You get me. Now I'm much more likely to be open to discussing or sharing or to exploring this with you. And then I think it's about breaking it down into stages. What is the story of the problem? What are you thinking and feeling about it? What might the other person be thinking and feeling? Because we're trying to explore other perspectives and being able to hold another person's mind in mind. And then using wondering. I wonder, to bring up storytelling is so effective because there's a rhythm and a synchrony to getting the story, and rhythm and synchrony trigger those parts of the brain for emotional regulation. You don't get to the solution until you're further down the map. And so I'm trying to give you a step by step for how to do that.
Oh, it's amazing. It really is. What you do, Joanna, and I don't think you realise. I'm sure you do, but I don't think you realise as much as you need to how life changing what you do is. And people just reading these books, they are. Somebody even said on Twitter this morning, and I've taken it as a quote and I've sent it over to you. And she just said, if you are a parent, you need these books.
Oh, I mean, that's just like, that's just really nice to hear. And I mean that genuinely because, yeah, you're right. It's hard. I know my intention in writing the books. I know my hope in writing the books. And, you put it out there and you hope it's received in the way it's intended to be received. But actually, for people who do share those kinds of thoughts and feedback, I hope you know how much it means to someone who's written a book to hear that actually it landed, it had its desired effect. That's really important. It's actually really, I think it's the best kind of review to get is from somebody who is walking the walk and says, yeah, this helps.
Can you believe somebody's just knocked on the front door?
I can, because this is working from home.
We'll talk about that in a minute, actually. What I was going to ask you is, you talk as well about how to be heard through the soundproof walls of the parent and adolescent relationship. That's one of the chapters. Can you talk us through that a little bit?
Yeah. So when I'm talking about, how to be heard through those soundproof walls, it's all about connection over correction. Because actually, our teenagers, these stages we talk about stages of parenting, the stages of growing up are to start out your life in love with your parent. They just know everything. Parents are amazing. You can give them all your problems and they know what to do. In middle childhood, I'm a little more cynical, like I'm asking you my questions, but I'm considering we should double check your answers on Google. Are you sure? Do you want to double check that? Or I might ask you, and then you overhear me asking my other parent the same question. And you're like, I just told you. So there's more doubt coming in. But in adolescence, I'm just outright opposed to everything you think and feel. I'm underwhelmed by you. I consider you were born 40 years old and you couldn't possibly have a clue as to what's going on in my life because you're like a dinosaur. And I just have this complete underwhelming, disappointing outlook with you. There's a lot of sighing, eye rolling, walking away, shrugging, like, oh gosh, poor mom, poor dad, what would they know? And that's actually deeply unpleasant as a parent, but absolutely normal from a teenager point of view. And it's actually not for us to try and chastise or critique or judge those responses in our teenager, but actually to connect with them in a bid to understand it and to say, okay, well, if that's where you're starting from, now I need to adapt how I do this to stay relevant, to actually insert myself by being interested, not intrusive, interested, and that is a fine line sometimes, but it's a really important one to hold, is actually to find other ways of communicating, find other ways of connecting. The key is to stay connected. And I think often, because our teenagers, we often feel like they're not listening. And we often hear this, like you feel like you're shouting into the wind. Like I've actually just given a list of instructions there and I feel like nobody was listening. I ask questions, nobody answers me. And then you say something kind of snippy, like, am I talking to the walls? And a teenager is going to say something really kind of triggering, like, I don't know, are you? And it's designed to wire us. So what we've got to do is say, okay, you're consumed with what's going on. You're distracted. I have to find another way of doing this. So that chapter is all about ways to stay connected and to prioritize the connection over any conflict or correction. And that doesn't mean being permissive. And I think, that's something I've always been clear about, Kim, as well, is that these books, because sometimes on the surface it might be, are you saying we should just keep playing with them and let all this stuff go? I'm absolutely not saying that. But I'm saying that if you want to correct behavior in a meaningful way, you can only do it within a connection. So if you're trying to get heard in those soundproof walls, you have to come at that in a very creative way. And it's a way that, instills emotional fluency, which is something I talk about a lot in this book as well, and creates a way of expressing and being heard in non-verbal ways as well. Oh, I can't hear you.
Sorry, we had a bit of dog barking
Oh,
going on.
sorry.
I muted myself.
Yeah.
So it's probably a very good time for me to pick up my phone and ask a question that a
Oh,
friend of
yes.
mine sent through. And she said, when your child is mouthing off at you, I won't tell you which friend it is, just in case, insists that you're not listening and that you are in the wrong when they're the ones that are in the wrong. How do you deal with that so that it doesn't end up in a full-scale war? Now, I
Yeah.
will just explain, this particular friend of mine has two very strong-willed children.
So I'm going to ask this friend of yours to ask and answer this question of themselves. Who do they remind you of? Who do these strong-willed children remind you of? And if it's yourself, if you were this strong-willed teenager, how do you wish you had been responded to in those moments? And can you start from there? If they remind you of someone else, how do you feel about that someone else? Because what of another part of your life is getting replayed here? I think, one of the things with teenage development we have to hold in mind is that the capacity to mentalize, and that is to consider other perspectives, to hold a mind in mind, to have that more flexible picture-based talking, that's still developing, picture-based thinking, that's still developing in them at this stage. So you can get a lot of absolute, literal, concrete statements like, no, you're wrong. You're just wrong. before you even say it, you're wrong. And what we're trying to do is actually get curious. So from when your young person is hitting you with these absolutes, this literal concrete way of thinking, I know what you're going to say. You know, when kids say this to you and they haven't even asked you the question yet, so you don't know what you're going to say because you don't know what the question is, but they come at you and they say, now, before I even ask you, I know what you're going to say, but I'm going to ask you anyway. I mean, you have just royally been set up to fail. You can only get it wrong at this point. So I think it's about staying curious. I think it's about actually accepting. If your teenager says to you, you're wrong, you're not listening, to actually take that as their truth. Okay. I'm going to actually say, go at this creatively and say, I got it wrong. I'm sorry. Maybe I jumped into kind of an assumption too quick. Tell me again the story. And this time I'm not going to try to fix it or even make sense of it. I'm just going to listen. And I promise you, I'll come at this and do it better. I wish I had done it this way. Give me a do-over. That kind of approach. And let them tell you again and then get curious this time. Okay, so what I've heard you say is, and you repeat back what you've heard, gives them a chance to kind of correct any assumptions you're making. It also gives you time to kind of think and gather your thoughts and then say, I'm wondering, where's your head at with this? What are you now thinking and feeling? Stay with them. Don't bring your own thoughts and feelings into it. You stay with them because what you're communicating is, I'm interested in your experience of this. And you're trying to help them to break down the story. They tell it to you. You reflect it back to them, which means they get to hear their own words reflected back to them. You're gradually making sense of what's going on in a way that allows them to be right, which they want to be and they need to be. So you're actually saying, okay, so you're thinking and feeling this. I'm wondering, the other person in the story or whoever else is involved in this, what might they be thinking and feeling about this? Now, be careful how you approach that because you don't want it to sound like you're automatically on the other person's side. So you're actually going, all right, and like, do you think they understand how you're thinking and feeling, or where are they coming from? That's a much better way to come at that than, and what might the other person be thinking? Because immediately I'm going to go, oh, there you go, taking everyone's side against me. And again, you get that wall shut down, those soundproof walls again. So then you actually let them kind of say, well, they're probably thinking X, Y, Z, and go, all right, so you guys had the same experience, but you've walked away with different feelings. I'm wondering what you could do about it. And if they're going, I don't know, and go, it reminds me of something that happened once upon a time to me. Let me just tell you that story. And you have some, not exactly the same, but related story. And here's what I found helpful. And if they go, that'll never work, just say, okay, it took me time to come up with that answer too, but we can talk about it more. Don't jump in to fix it. All you're trying to do is listen. I've sat with so many teenagers who say, all I want them to do is listen. I don't want them to tell me what to do or to fix it. But if you've got that argumentative teenager, what you've got is a teenager that in those, you know, in the book I talk about the 5 adjustments of adolescence.
Yeah.
And one of those adjustments is conflict. And conflict is something that's an inherent part of teenage development and therefore an inherent part of the parent-teenager relationship. So you have to find a way of engaging in conflict in a non-conflictual way. And that's about, you know, staying in your grounded position. And if you feel, not if, like when you feel that you're actually going to figuratively throttle them and you're actually getting to that point of, would you ever stop, like, and just accept what I'm trying to do? Because I think it can trigger quite a bit in us that you actually see that coming in yourself. It's a bit like the flip lid idea. Your lid is getting very loose now. You actually need to say, I don't feel like I can keep talking about this because I feel like we're talking around in circles and I'm afraid I'm going to get frustrated and say the wrong thing. And I really don't want to do that. So I'm going to take a break from what we're talking about and we can pick it up again later on. But I need to take some space for myself. And even if that annoys them, you're also teaching them that it's okay to take a break from conflict. It's okay to walk away from something, and actually taking care of yourself is really important. So there's really beneficial piece to approaching it that way. But conflict is unavoidable. It's how you engage with it, and you have to be creative in how you do that. That's the rupture and repair. And I could see somebody mentioned rupture and repair in the comments there.
Claire, she's just said she loves the rupture and repair approach. I find it so easy to get my head around this and to put it into practice.
Yeah, and Claire, you know, I think that it is in the early years, and while it's still so relevant, and even dare I say, amplified. It's a big relevance in adolescence. It becomes more challenging to hold that rupture and repair, because teenagers can, our small children, will lash out at us and push boundaries. Our teenagers lash out at us and push boundaries, but now they have a range of language and expression to go with it that the little ones may not have. So engaging in rupture, or in repair following rupture, is very, very important, but can be challenging. And I just, one of the things I say in the book about that is that repair is always the responsibility of the parent or the caregiver. Always. I say it twice because I think it's like, what if they're wrong and I'm right? And as your friend's saying, but they say they're right even when they're not right. The being right and who's right, if that's what's driving you, you're going to enter into the conflict with them, because you're also going to we all love to be right. I mean, we all love to be right about things. You're going to enter into the conflict to seek to assert that point. But if you can hold in mind that repair is the goal and it's always the responsibility of the caregiver, then what you're actually communicating with your teenager is that the relationship is much more important than the conflict, that your connection with them is always more important to you than the conflict between you. That doesn't mean your teenager's not wrong and that they don't need to find some way of making repair with you and saying sorry. But actually, that's very difficult for a teenager to do, because they live in those absolutes of certainty and those expressions of certainty. So it might be that you walk away, that you initiate repair, and that's not saying you're right and I'm wrong. It's saying our relationship is what matters to me, not what we're arguing about.
Really, really interesting. Teenage years are years when people can become very anxious about lots of things that are going on in their life. And obviously, as a parent, we've all been sort of parenting through this pandemic where we're getting anxious and the kids are getting anxious. How can you give us any sort of pointers as to how to cope with that better than we might be at the moment? I know I certainly, I feel a little bit anxious, even though I don't really think I'm anxious, but I know I am.
That's such a good way to put it. Do I think I'm anxious, or do I know I am? And actually, those can be different things. That our bodies can say you are actually, while our minds are going, no, I feel like I'm nailing this. Like this is going really well. I have a clear plan. But actually, our bodies are holding that tension and we're somatizing it. We might be living with an increased heart rate, more prone to sweaty palms. And how we play that out tends to be when things that matter to us actually are the things that we stop doing. Like maybe we've stopped taking those walks and the Zoom yoga classes have lost their appeal. And, we're actually getting a bit fed up. And so we're turning to the fridge and the cupboards, because food is so regulating. In general, food is so emotionally regulating. But when you find that your habits are shifting, then actually, yes, you are holding anxiety. It's how you're playing it out. That is something to look at. I think actually, and I know everybody globally is experiencing this second wave of this pandemic, and numbers are high, and so restrictions are high too. And I'm obviously based here in Ireland, and we're in what we call level 5, which is the highest level of restriction for the next 6 weeks. And I just see the emotional fatigue that has set in, and that is helping, that things that were almost like, come on guys, we're all in this together at the beginning, is now every person for themselves at this stage. And it's because it's gone on for so long and we're tired. So how we parent through this pandemic actually changes as this time has gone on. What worked for us at the beginning, when we were all trying to keep so many balls in the air and trying to nail it, like work from home as if you're not a parent, and parent from home as if you're not working, and in between the two be a teacher, by the way, with no training. Just hit that ground running, and could you do all of that at once? That I think at this stage we need to have learned from that and the impact all of that pressure had on us. And we need to be kinder to ourselves, and we need to give ourselves a break. I think we need to give ourselves an opportunity to struggle. We need to acknowledge that this is hard and that we're finding it hard, so that we can stop finding it hard. Like if we keep saying, I gotta get this right, I think we have to feel what we're feeling in the moment. So I think give yourself a break, but try to be creative within it. And that break might be that, there's a little bit more screen time going on for everybody than is ideal. But can I make that a nurture activity with me and my teenager? Can we make a snack? Can we cuddle up under the duvet? Can we actually watch their favorite movie? And then my favorite movie from when I was a teenager, which is like completely dated now, but they might get a kick out of it, and you have that exchange and connection with it. Are there, ways that we can be playful together, that enable me to get this 15 minutes connection in a way that's allowing us both? I just don't ask me any questions. I just don't want to talk about things right now. Is there a playful way to actually get to how you're feeling? And one of the things that I do in this book, as you've seen, Kim, is that I take some of the play that you actually did do in the earlier books and I grow it up, so that actually it's not like you have to learn a whole new set of play, but actually sometimes it's a small change that makes a big difference. And the feelings Jenga is one example of that, where this time you would take your Jenga blocks, and then, in the earlier books I talked about you getting your color coded blocks or coloring them with a marker yourself, and each color would be a feeling, and when you push out the block you tell a time you had that feeling. But this time it's about taking your Jenga blocks and getting a Sharpie and writing things on it. Something that makes me happy, something that scares me, something that makes me angry, something that excites me, something that makes me laugh, something that makes me cry, whatever it might be. You fill the blocks with phrases, and while you play this time you each have to complete the sentence. Something that makes me laugh is, and then you could get curious about when is the last time that happened, but you're actually having an emotional conversation without actually saying, what's going on for you? Do you want to talk about that? Because immediately your teenager's going, oh, now, where are you going with this? What's the agenda here? But if you keep it through that playful piece, I think you've got a much better chance. So I would be saying go slow and steady at this stage of the pandemic. Give yourself a break. You're allowed to have off days. And what's important is you talk about those, and that you actually say to your teenager, today hasn't been such a great day for me. I really feel the need to just mind myself. So I'm going to have a hot bath. I'm going to go to bed early and I'm just going to read a book. But that's where I am if you need me. Because you're saying I'm available to you, but I'm also prioritizing how I feel, because then we're giving them permission to do the same. Because I do think we can sacrifice self-care in parenting, because we're so focused on the impact on our kids and how they're doing. But one of the greatest kindnesses we can do our kids is to take care of ourselves. I really feel very strongly about that, and putting yourself front and center.
Well, that's good. I'm going to have a bath, go to bed early, and read a book tonight then. That's
I
my.
know, you see, and I do think there is like, for some people you're going, oh no, I'd hate that. And it might be some other way. It might be a really hot shower, and fresh pajamas might do it for you, or a face mask, or getting out, for a walk, one of those cold air walks, in the evening time. And, so we all have our version of it. So what I don't say that to be prescriptive, but more to invite you to think about what's your version of that plan.
And it's probably it's a nice thing to do as well, to maybe ask your child what they like to do when they
Yeah.
feel that way, and then you can kind of sort of maybe intermingle the two as well.
Yeah, and don't be shocked if they say to you, I don't know, because maybe they don't know. I think sometimes we take I don't knows from our teenagers as, oppositional or a defiant attitude, or you just don't want to tell me. When actually, if we took it as their truth and said, they don't know, maybe they don't. And maybe it's an opportunity to explore things that might help and work, and to share what works for you. But in order to do that, you have to know what works for you.
Yeah, I know Ollie sometimes. I'll look at him sometimes and I know he's not feeling right. And I'll say, "Are you okay, darling?" And he'll go, "I just don't feel myself, Mum. I just,
Mm.
I just don't feel myself." And I'll say, "Do you know what it is?" And he's like, "No, I don't know why, but I just don't feel myself."
And I think that's actually so smart, isn't it? Being able to recognize what is your baseline, which is myself, when I'm feeling, we talked about it previously. I think that when the last book was coming out about that window of tolerance, where everything feels comfortable.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean you don't have highs and lows within that window, but it feels manageable and comfortable. And then when I'm not feeling myself, what I'm really saying is I'm outside of that window. I'm actually in the discomfort zone, and it's icky, it's uncomfortable, but it's very hard to articulate it. But knowing it, recognizing I don't feel myself, and having a plan in place ahead of time for what should I do when I don't feel myself? What helps me to begin to relax and, i.e., feel myself again? That's actually a self-care strategy. And that's so, so important. But it's hard to come up with those when you're in the funk, when you're in that dysregulated state. It's much more important to explore those creatively when things actually feel comfortable, so that I should do that bath thing that my mother spoke about, or maybe if I took a walk, or maybe if I watched a funny movie, a movie I know makes me laugh, because laughter is such an effective tool to release tension from the body. But I have to know that.
Definitely. Why is it that some teenagers manage friendships really well and others really struggle with it?
Yeah, I mean, there's no kind of clear cut answer to that other than that is a truth. Okay, that some of them do seem to manage really well and others really struggle. And sometimes you might have a child who has struggled with early stage friendships and is okay now. And sometimes it's even more confusing that you've had a child who's had lots of friends and always found friendships easy until the adolescent years. And I always think that, and I do a lot of talks in schools to both to students, but also to teachers and parents. And one of the things that comes up is, that school year between turning 14 even to 15, that kind of age, that early adolescent stage, there's huge shift in friendship patterns at that stage, because in that summer between their first year in second level school and their second year, some of them, return after that summer and overnight they seem to have become 26 years old. And some of them are still the 12, 13 that they were in that first year. So the friend I had, because actually developmentally we were quite aligned, actually now we're not. And losing a friend at that stage, especially for girls, there is a bit of a gendered lens to the friendships, and because girls tend to be so intimate with their friends at that stage and share so much, is akin to a breakup or a heartbreak or a loss, a real loss. And it can be hard for me to find my feet. Also in second level, for teenagers, the friendship cliques are a thing. And I may have had my community around me in primary level school, but now I've gone from being the biggest in the small school to the smallest in the big school. Everything has changed. I've had to make new friends, because some of the friends that I had in school, they've gone to different schools. And actually, regardless of whether all my friends are there or not, there are other kids I've never met before that I have to interact with. So I have to develop new relationships. I have to start over and discover who's like me, who's not. How does this feel for me? How does it not? At a time when actually my brain is on fire with those impulse reward seeking drives, that risk taking behavior, hormones are riding high, and I have to manage all of that while actually developing new friendships. And it's really difficult. And yet some kids can kind of go, oh yeah, it's great. Like I joined the basketball team and I just hang out with all of them and we have a shared interest and I love that and we get to do loads after school. And others just struggle to find their place in the second level school community and just don't feel a fit. But there's so many temptations, demands, and identity formation that's going on. And I really wanted in the book, to shine a light on the identity piece, because I'm rediscovering that sense of self and deepening my understanding of who I am. And that brings with it friendships and all that goes there. I think it can be really difficult for some kids. I know it can. It's actually one of the most common reasons that people reach out to me for therapeutic support, is that the presenting symptom is in and around friendship.
Mm-hmm. How do you get children to open up to you about bullying? How would you tackle that? And the reason I ask that is because I'm very open, Joanna, and I'll talk about my relationship with Oliver. He came home from school last Friday, and he was really upset. And when he calmed himself down, he said that one of his friends had punched him at school.
Oh.
Um, and I did exactly what you did. We went into A&E mode, and I listened to him and got him to talk about it and said, how do you think we should deal with this and everything?
Yeah.
And I actually took him out for a cup of coffee, and well, he didn't have coffee obviously, but we went out and I just spent some time with him, and then we came back and talked about it, and he said he wanted to kind of handle that himself. Me being the helicopter mom that I am, I try very hard.
I'm listening going, Kim, I am so impressed. You like, and I was like, where is the helicopter?
Yeah, I've changed a little bit. I kind of, I think I did everything that I thought I should do. But there was a little bit of me that just wanted to kind of, ring school straight away, report it
Totally.
to the school, go around to the person's house, go and speak to his mother, because it was somebody that he knew as well. But
Yeah.
he did deal with it. And he did deal with it all himself, and then came back on Monday and told me that he'd kind of spoken to this lad at school and dealt with it and everything, which I was really proud of. But you know, how do you tackle bullying?
Yeah, I think actually what you did in spite of your instinct was the best thing to do in this situation. Was your first thing was to go to comfort, to regulate him, to cope, because he'd had a really bad day and a really confusing, upsetting experience. And instead of going into solution fix mode, you avoided that fix agenda and you said, I actually see that you need to calm down and feel better to get you back into that comfort zone so that you can think and talk about this, because it's very hard to think and talk about something in a heightened state of emotion. So when you went with nurture and comfort first, you enabled him to tell the story, think about how he was feeling, and then to put it to him, what should we do about this? I think that was a really great way to word it. And he told you, I can handle this. And everything you described next, I think every parent is going, oh, I would have been onto that school. I would have, because that's our instinct is somebody has hurt my child. I mean, your kind of inner mama bear comes out fairly quick with that because we are wired to protect and safeguard our children. But actually, the best way you can safeguard him is to let him do it. Now, that doesn't mean that you kind of go sail off into the sunset there and good luck with that. You let him do it. And when he comes home on the Monday, you express curiosity about that problem. How is it going? Because it may be that your young person is saying to you then, I did try, but it didn't work. Like it actually got worse. And now I don't want to go to school. So that's when you go, actually, as soon as you get to this point where you don't want to go to school about it, that's actually my cue that I need to step in. So let me explain to you what I'm going to do. I'm not asking you, can I do it now? But I don't want you to feel like I'm taking over. So I'm going to share with you what I'm going to do. The bullying piece is really interesting in this age because in the earlier book, you remember, unintentionally, controversially, I said, that we shouldn't label everything as bullying with our kids, that we're not doing them any favors, that we have to explore the possibility of kids being mean to each other, being rude to each other, and kids bullying each other, and that those are different things. But if we mislabel every kind of meanness one kid does to another, then actually we're doing a great disservice to our kids because they can be rude and mean. But a one-off, I don't want to play with you today, you're driving me crazy, get away from me. That's unpleasant and it's rude and it's even mean, but it's not bullying unless it's pervasive, conscious, and targeted behavior. In secondary school kids, it tends to become a little bit more complex because they do know what they're doing. They do know the effect that behavior has. But sometimes I'm having a struggle myself, and this is explaining, not excusing, that I'm having a struggle myself and I can feel myself getting, I'm feeling kind of crappy and not great and my self-esteem's taking a battering, but I find it very hard to contain and make sense of those icky, uncomfortable feelings. So I'm going to evacuate those and project them out onto somebody safe, which might be my good old friend Ollie, who's always been there for me. And inexplicably, even to myself, I lash out. And in the lashing out, it's a way of releasing something in me onto somebody safe. But then I'm not stopping to think, how might he experience this? Which is why him coming and saying, hey, what was that about? That was not okay and it cannot happen again. I felt really bad about that. It enables me to go, oh, cause and effect. My feelings and my actions had an impact on another. So if that was to continue or escalate, we would be veering into something that needs to look at, okay, hang on. You did it once, there might be a reason. It was pointed out to you, but now you've consciously repeated the behavior. Now we're veering into a territory that may require parental involvement. But at this point and so far, I think you've done, in spite of your instincts, the exact right thing because it has enabled him to feel really proud of himself for working this out.
But do you know, Joanna, I would not have done that if I hadn't read your books, and I really do mean that because I wouldn't. I'd have been straight on the phone,
Yeah,
been ringing the school. I'd have been demanding to go up there and to deal with it. And it was only because I've read your books and realised what an impact the things that you say have that made me do that.
oh, well, look, I'm actually really glad because I do think this is the one. And, I can think of that as a professional self. My parenting self can totally feel the instinct piece. Like I can feel, I'm sorry, someone did what to you? that you want to jump in. But, you know, I also know firsthand, and I've heard it time and again from kids, that what they need is because somebody lashing out, somebody you love and trust, a friend lashing out at you like that, that's actually really humiliating. And that brings up levels of shame. And actually, that can really hit at my self-esteem, which is already so fragile in early adolescence. So the super benefit for me is that I feel like I had that experience. I could make sense of it with you, and then I could take an action that brought about an outcome. Look at me nailing life. Like that's telling me I can handle this. I can actually handle this stuff. It's okay. And that is developmentally vital because it's giving me, we talk about resilience, we talk about, you know, kids being emotionally resilient and robust, but these are just buzzwords if we don't have an action plan for how to bring them there.
I am learning because yesterday, I should have shown you actually, yesterday, you know, when we were on that call,
Yeah.
Olive came in
Oh,
once,
yeah.
left a note on the door to say, I'm on the phone to Joanna and I'm on a call with Joanna. So let yourself in and everything. And he came in and he actually said to me, can I make myself a sandwich? And I went, yeah, of course you can. And I was like, oh my God, 6 months ago, I'd have been going, just wait a minute. I'll do your sandwich in a minute. And he did his sandwich and he did it all. And I was just thinking, Joanna would be so proud of me.
I was actually looking at you going, do you mean to tell me he's never made a sandwich? Like, what no, and you know, but that is so important because, you know, in the earlier books, I do talk about why we should give our kids chores from as young as 2. And it's not like I expect them now, Cinderella style, to be sweeping out the house at 2 years old. But actually, I think it's really important we give them an opportunity to contribute to the family and to contribute in a way that shows them you're important and look at all you can do. And that's the point of all the challenge play that we were talking about in those earlier books, because challenge play is about stretching me a little, not a lot, but a little out of my comfort zone to kind of encourage me to engage in healthy risk-taking behavior, which then pays its dividends in this adolescent stage. Because if I know how to take chances and I know how to try out something new and to take on a responsibility, then I know how to engage in healthy risk-taking behavior. And I also know how to nurture myself and take care of myself. Look, the job of parenting is to raise independent adults eventually. And no, but you know, it's so, so important because that's how we know that we're doing it right. When they actually can say, I'm just going to do this for myself. And those moments of surprise that, oh, he can do it, but moreover, oh, I can let him do it. That those are when you know you're winning.
Definitely, definitely. One of the other questions I was going to ask you is, and we talked there about sort of risk taking, but there can obviously be a very dark side to adolescence, and I know you talk about that a lot in the book. How do you, you know, how as a parent can you deal with some of those dark issues that come up?
Yeah. And look, I think darkness is a part of life. You know, we know that it's there, and we don't do our kids a service by trying to sanitize life, because actually they will encounter darkness and dark moments. And, you know, you're right, speak about that in terms of even themes in TV shows and things like that. But there is a darker side as well when our teenagers maybe are more wired towards the unhealthy risk-taking behaviors, and they're engaged in a pattern of behavior that is self-destructive and potentially self-injurious as well, that there's a risk to this. And that could be not just experimenting with alcohol, but actually really engaging in consumption of alcohol or drugs, or experimenting with sex. And again, sex isn't a problem, but actually it's knowing how to be responsible and to take care of myself within all of that experimentation. That's how you know it's part of that exploration of adolescence, but not being able to safeguard myself in it. That's the problem. And looking then at when, you know, we often talk about mental health and youth mental health. You know, it's a hashtag on all social media. And for me, it was important to explore what does that mean? Because actually language matters when it comes to this stuff. And I wanted to challenge some of that, because we all have mental health, all of us. And part of the challenge of life is to stay mentally healthy. And there are strategies and things that we can do to do that. But not all of us have mental illness. And actually, we know from all of the emerging research that the most prevalent mental illness for teenagers is depression and anxiety. And particularly anxiety is on a sharp increase. I think something like 27%. There's been that level of increase in anxiety presentations. And that's when it's over and above. And I guess, how do you know when the dark stuff is really dark? Is actually paying attention to your parental radar. Okay. And when you feel this is too much, this isn't right. Like, I think some degree of anxiety is normal in adolescence. It is, I actually in the book refer to it as the age of anxiety. Like, studying for an exam, that's going to make me anxious, but that anxiety might actually motivate a pro-social behavior in me, like studying. Maybe, having to meet new friends and make new friends, that's anxiety provoking, but there is a pro-social benefit. Even the situation you just spoke about, having to go in and confront a friend about something they've done that upset me, that's an anxiety provoking situation. But once the situation has ended, so too does the anxiety. It's if the anxiety is pervasive and it's more often there than not there, and it isn't context specific, and sometimes I'm simply worrying about the fact that I'm worrying and I'm not able to control that. That's when I go, okay, that's the over and above stuff. That's when actually parenting alone is not going to get through this and get your teenager through this. That's when you do reach out for support. If we see teenagers engaging in self-harming behaviors, that might include eating disordered behavior, it might include various forms of self-harm. Immediately, that's not something you're going to manage with parenting alone. That's going to require outside input. But in saying that, there are things that you can do at home. And that's why I wanted to cover those things. I wanted to cover, mental illness in teenagers. I wanted to cover self-harm, eating disorder thinking, and even aspects of kind of teenage delinquent behaviors like stealing. I wanted to cover these so that, you recognize when it's within the range of what I can manage, and when it's actually outside of that range, what do I need to do? And while doing that, what can I do within my parenting at home? So it's never a matter of, oh, it's not for you, outsource that. It's okay, you're going to bring in outside help. And as well as that, here's what you're going to do. And it's about, how do you recognize when you've crossed from what might be unpleasant but normal into something that's over and above. And sometimes that's a fuzzy line. Sometimes it's like stark and clear, but sometimes it's a fuzzy line. And, parenting teenagers through life currently, I often think, I'd like to think I wasn't a teenager a million years ago, but I mean, it's also not today or yesterday. But I'm so grateful that I was doing that and negotiating all of that without smartphones and social media, because growing up as a teenager today is different. Okay, it is absolutely a different experience. Like their world, their social engagement, the constant switched on 24/7 of it all is something that we parents of teenagers now did not have to deal with. So we have to kind of start from that place of, this is different, this is uncharted territory. And you know what? If it's different for them, it has also never been like this to parent teenagers. How our parents parented us, it isn't a template that works now. It is different because being a teenager is different. So we are all learning on the job, if you like. We're all trying to evolve and catch up with it. But I would always say to parents, when it doesn't feel right, it's not right.
That's amazing advice. Because I think sometimes you do dither about what you should do, when
Yeah.
you should step
Yeah.
in, and all those different things, don't you?
And Kim, like, I'd have parents who are saying, look, I don't know if this is an issue. I don't know if I'm overreacting. And I'm going to say, well, look, I'm not going to offer, and any therapist in my position, we're not offering therapy if it's not needed. So if I see a young person and I'm like, okay, do you know what? I actually think you're right. I don't think you need to be coming. But what might be helpful is if I have a chat with your parents for a week or two. And look, you know where I am if things change and you ever want to come here. I hope you've had an experience that shows you this isn't awful, and that if things change, I'd love you to be able to say you could come back. And I might be going back to that parent saying, do you know, I think things are actually mostly okay at the moment, but might be helpful if I talk you through some parenting responses and techniques that actually would help you get through this piece. So if in doubt, there's no harm in reaching out, because a mental health practitioner is not going to give you treatment for treatment's sake.
Do you have a couple of sort of quick and easy tips that you can give us to get your child playing? It's not easy with teenagers, obviously.
No, it's not.
Get them
No.
playing. But are there a couple of things that you kind of go, that works every time?
Yeah, I think when in doubt, go to challenge. I think teenagers respond really well to challenge because it's a way of getting them engaged. So I tend to throw out something that sounds a bit crazy and they're like, what? Let's see. So I might do, do you know, I mentioned leg wrestling in the book.
Mm.
You know, in the other books, I talked about thumb wrestling. And now I'm saying, oh, if you want to get, I mean, lots of teenagers love thumb wrestling, by the way, but you have to make it more challenging. So I tend to say, cover your hands in lotion. And so you're doing your thumb wrestle with a slippery hand, but you also get the tactile transfer. But I'll throw out something crazy like, do you know how to leg wrestle? And it's usually met with either, yeah, I do, and I'm going to nail this, let's do it, or no, and go, yeah, I'm just trying to work it out. Come here, do this with me for a minute. And you make it like, come on, let's just do it. Not, are you open to this? Would you like to do it? I mean, none of that, just do it. And leg wrestling, by the way, I mean, you could look this up. Just be really careful about what you Google when you're talking about these terms. You know, God knows what you're going to see. But you lie down so that you're kind of hip to hip and you have your legs that are closest to each other. You kind of go 1, 2, 3, and then you lock legs, and the job is to try and flip each other over. So it is challenging, and it's something you can only do with a teenager who's, you know, physically more aligned to your size. I tend to use like challenge techniques like partner pull up, like sit down on the floor with your bum and your knees facing each other but bent up, and then take hands, pull against each other in a way, and try and leverage each other into a standing position. They're very challenging things, but what you've been doing is playing, laughing, and holding hands. So you're getting tons of benefit in there. I like to do things that are a little bit more creative as well, but you don't want to do a huge fanfare. I think popcorn storytelling is useful because, yeah, it's nice if everybody comes together to do it, but they don't have to. If they want to sit over in the chair, flicking in their phone and only half listening to you, or seemingly only half listening to you, don't make that a battle. But you throw out the beginning of a story, they throw in a line, you react, they react, you react, and you build a story starting with the kernel and expanding it as it goes. I think those kinds of activities, but also I like to make it relevant. Like I might take things from social media, you know, and there's no end of mean comments on social media. And I just take a few examples and I say, now we're actually going to read these to each other as if we were saying them in real life. And just to see, you know, how would you ever say that in real life? Why would you say it online? But you do it in a playful, experiential way. I think that's nice. I love to do a challenge where everybody gets the makings of Play-Doh, but I give them like food dyes, scented oils, maybe cocoa powder or fresh herbs. So they get to make their own very fancy, scented Play-Doh. And then everybody picks something out of a bowl and they have to make it. And then we have to guess what each other made. But you get the added sensory piece of making the Play-Doh and then the piece of playing something from a bowl. So it's like a sculptionary with a bit of a twist on it. And I think if you've got if you have in your family more people, or it's a situation where you've more people over, which again is uncommon in a pandemic, but in the good old days, you could do something that involves teams, because actually that, again, that competitive challenge edge is really engaging. You know, the balloon over under game where you stand in a line and the first person passes the balloon over their head and the second person under their legs, over, under, the whole way back, and you time each other, or you've two teams to win. Or games like cup up, cup down, where you've even numbers of paper cups facing up and facing down. One team is up, one team is down, and on go, you have to keep turning the cups so that at the end, see which team has most up versus down, and they win. So bringing in a more competitive edge, and actually bringing in the more current themes like social media, and using things from online, and using, I talk about conversational analysis, to kind of enrich that non-verbal cue piece. There's loads of ways of doing this. So in the book, I've packed it with games, but I've also included creative communication techniques that are therapeutic. Like, how would you do this in a creative way that's more about strategy than game? But what I wanted to be clear about is that there's nothing in this book, activity wise, that I haven't tried and tested many, many times. I haven't included anything that I haven't done, because I know that people say, you know, I see how you can play with the kids, but like it's much harder now. So I wanted to include things that are entirely possible and successful. We have to be honest. Is it that our teenagers don't want to play, or that we feel awkward playing with them? And if it's us, then just read this. Take it, start with something that you go, yeah, I could do that. I could actually do that. And start with that. Don't start with the thing that goes, oh, I don't know if they do that. Don't start with that one. Start with something that you know will guarantee you success and build from there. But I still think we have to playfully connect. And it comes back to that message: play isn't a box of toys, because the toys are gone now. Play is a state of mind and a way of being. You have to be playful.
And it also brings me the one thing that I had written down to sort of to finish off with, because we have been chatting again for an hour, which goes by in about 5 minutes. But one of the things you say at the end of the book is that play is for life.
Oh, yeah. Play is for life. You are never too old for play. And in fact, I don't think we are playful enough in our older lives, and I did talk about how in an elder home, a home for the elderly, I've seen a marshmallow snowball fight. I talked about cotton ball snowball fight in one of the earlier books, but that actually play is good for the mind, it's good for the soul, but it's such an effective way to manage the everyday stress and anxiety of life, and to make sense of our experiences in life that we can't make sense of by thinking alone. We have to make sense of by doing. That play is for life. And play is for life because parenting is for life. It never ends. It never ends.
But hopefully, people who read your book might not feel that way.
No, they'd be like, oh my God, this is it. This is what I've been looking for.
And it is amazing. We have the proof that it is life-changing. I'm really looking forward to seeing something coming out soon in one of the national magazines where you've done a case study, and I can't wait for people to sort of to read that and see what they've done, because that was very a challenging situation, which they came back and you had completely changed their lives in just a week.
I know it was, and it was, there was a lot of complexity there, and life is full of complexity. Life happens to people, so it's about finding creative ways of just getting ourselves through it.
Wow. Enjoy the rest of your publication day, Joanna.
Thank you so much. I always love talking to you.
Me too. And I'll find lots more problems for the next time we catch up. And thank you all for listening in today. I hope you've enjoyed listening to Joanna as much as I have. And here we have 15-minute parenting, the teenage years, which is out today. So thank you, Joanna, and I will speak to you very soon.
Thanks, Kim. Bye, everyone.